So if you're a follower of me for a very long time, you're probably pretty aware of my Laserdisc collection and my love for Laserdisc. But I think there's probably an acute number of you that may not be aware of it at all. And there may be some of you who are younger who may not know too much about Laserdisc. So I wanted to take today and talk about my collection and things that I love about Laserdisc, the look of them, the sound of them, the appeal to them, the classicness of them. It's my VHS in a sense. While granted I grew up with VHS, my story of Laserdisc was simple yet profound. It had a very, very long-lasting impact on me from the first time I ever heard about it. I was sitting at my friend Randy's house one evening, and we were watching some movie on the television. It might have been Beavis and Butthead Do America or something. It was in the late 90s, and I'm sitting on the ground by the couch because the couch was taken up at that point. And I look to my right, and I see this little carton, and it looks like it's got records in it, but I go to look at it, and the first thing I ever see is this Predator Laserdisc. I pull it out and I look at it, and I look at Randy's mom and I say, "What is this?" And she goes, "Oh, those are movies. That's a Laserdisc." And the sound of it, that's the coolest sounding format I've ever heard of, Laserdisc. And I just remember saying to myself, "Well, how do you play it?" And she goes, "There's a player. You put it in like a big CD, and you put it in, and then it plays." And I just remember that day profoundly. The only other time I remember seeing a Laserdisc player again in my life was in 6th grade in Mr. Griffin's class. He had one of those TVs that we used to mount on the wall back in the day when they would mount CRTs into the wall. And then there was the deck where you could put your players, and he had a Laserdisc player in there. And I remember him having a Laserdisc player there, and I remember asking, "Hey, is that a Laserdisc player?" And he goes, "That's actually a Laserdisc player. That's right. Good job. I didn't think you would know that." Because it always, like, in my world, it wasn't something I just saw. To my surprise, I learned that Laserdisc was a big thing. And I want to talk about some probably misconceptions some people have and just things about the format, along with showing a lot of my all-time favorite releases I have. So I'll do that as we go through. So let's start getting into this video and look at some really cool Laserdiscs of the horror variety. The first one here is Puppet Master. Now this is a release is what you would be like your VHS equivalent. Like, the Puppet Master Laserdisc is really cool, but a lot of Laserdiscs, too, you gotta understand, they were taken from the same master, as it were. Like, when they put these on VHS, well, the Laserdisc would get the same look for a lot of them. And it was taken from the same master tape that they would do the production for. The only thing is, like, Laserdisc could handle a little bit better picture at the time and better audio. And nothing was compressed. Audio sounded really good. And a lot of times stuff was in stereo, and so the audio was a lot better on Laserdisc, and the picture was better. At the time, it would probably seem a lot more substantial from the difference, but you gotta remember, a lot of people during this time, they had boxy CRT TVs, especially when this movie came out in 1989. The technology for the Laserdisc was always seemingly slightly ahead of what the televisions were in the average home, and we wouldn't be till the 90s till we would start to see real differences in this kind of thing. But at the time, this was the best way you could see Puppet Master was on the Laserdisc. Here's another equivalent to a VHS kind of release that you would see, Creepshow 2. Now, a lot of times when you would see these releases like I talked about, when you would see them, especially from the media group or the Image Entertainment group, they would look better than the VHS, but it just depends. I got a thing that happens too is there's such thing called laser rot, and it's basically when the glue and the elements inside the actual Laserdiscs start to detach a little bit and the picture starts to get real fuzzy and blurry. It doesn't happen often if you take care of them, but seemingly there's sometimes just nothing you can really do about laser rot. Luckily, my Creepshow 2 does not have laser rot, and the picture's actually pretty good on it. When we think about the world of physical media today, one thing we like to think about a lot is special edition, collector's edition, remasters, better picture, better frame rate, better audio. Well, Laserdisc was a company that was really doing that, and there was a company called Elite Entertainment that were the best at it at the time. Here is the Elite Entertainment release of Day of the Dead, and they did a really great job on this. This release came out in the very late 90s, which is another big misconception, is that Laserdisc was a flop. It was a format that didn't last. That's just not true. But it's not hard to understand why people think that because for a lot of people, Laserdisc was just almost a figment of their imagination. It was something they might have heard of, but they didn't see that often. So I understand it, but the truth is Laserdisc was around. It lasted the average length of any really physical home media release. Actually, I would say one of the longer physical media releases. I think DVD right now is the longest reigning, but Laserdisc started around the mid to late 70s and kept going and didn't really discontinue completely until 2001 in Japan. In America, it was really 1999, but in Japan, it hung on a little bit longer. And this came out in 1998. This is the Day of the Dead Deluxe Special Edition letterbox. So this was a nice widescreen edition. Back when people would see the black bars on top of their TVs and think something was wrong, not realizing they were getting the director's intended look of the film, that widescreen presentation where you saw everything in camera as opposed to zoomed in and cropped to fit your boxed TVs. I can't show Day of the Dead without showing my Dawn of the Dead Laserdisc. Now this again is the deluxe letterboxed release. Now the thing about Laserdisc 2 that I haven't mentioned yet is that on certain type of discs you could play 60 minutes of time, and on other types of discs you could play 30 minutes of time. Now the benefit of the 30 minutes of time is I believe they're supposed to play a little bit better, have a little bit better picture quality, and everything is just supposed to be better. Sometimes it's hard to tell, but a lot of times movies would have to be on 2 discs because a movie like Dawn of the Dead, which is not a really short movie, has to be on 2 discs. So Dawn of the Dead comes in 2 discs that you have to flip twice. You have to flip it after 60 minutes and then watch side 2 of the movie and then pull in this disc, what's called disc 3 and 4, which is the sides, and finish it on the second one. But this Dawn of the Dead release at the time was the most amazing way to watch this movie. And the picture and audio are fantastic. Again, this came out in the mid to late 90s, 1996. So when you would get this movie, you would see those black bars at the top because you were seeing the complete image the way George Romero wanted you to see. And the audio was fantastic. And they gave you great new artwork, crisp artwork on these new Laserdisc releases. It really was the special edition before special edition was really a thing. Something else, too, that Laserdisc does is still have a few releases that you could only see on that format. Now, I actually do believe that this release, what I'm about to show you, has a VHS of the same way. But at the time, when you wanted to see the uncut version of Scream, the Laserdisc was one of the ways to do it. Laserdisc had the director's cut of Scream that was so elusive till this very day that people want to watch and see. There are ways to see it, of course, but if you want to own it on Blu-ray or DVD or 4K, I don't think you can see it uncut. At least not a legitimate release. There's probably bootlegs. But at the time, Scream got a director's cut on Laserdisc. Now, this includes the longer panning shots of Drew Barrymore hanging in the tree, the extended death cut of her boyfriend with her guts spilling out on the deck, some extended dialogue scenes and gas station dialogue scenes. It's really cool. So the Scream Laserdisc is still one of my favorite releases because I get my uncut fix of Scream. Another thing I don't know that people know about is that Laserdisc didn't just put out prestige movies all the time. A lot of movies that were made for TV movies would get home media releases too, and Laserdisc was not immune to getting those either. So here's an example of Psycho 4, which was a made-for-TV movie. And of course, Laserdisc got its release of that too. Granted, it's Psycho, so it's a bigger title, but there are other movies like Frankenstein from 1993, which was a made-for-TV movie, and it was another adaptation of the Mary Shelley novel, which I love, but I have that as well. But a lot of made-for-TV stuff that got home media releases also were on Laserdisc. So Laserdisc got a wide variety of selections. It was like if it came out during the mid-'70s to the early 2000s or really late 90s, odds are it got a Laserdisc release. So it's 1993 or 94, and Jason Goes to Hell comes out on physical media at the time. You want to go see it because you hear that the home media releases were going to be director's cuts. But you want to see it in the best way possible, and money is no option. Well, have no fear because the Laserdisc as well got that unrated director's original cut. So, again, a lot of times when movies would get those cuts that you would want to see, Laserdisc wasn't immune to getting them, as well as the VHS. I understand why VHS was more accessible. I actually do think size was an important factor. Let's face it, even though they're thin, Laserdiscs are big and can take up a lot more space in a sense, and other ways they may not, depending on the way you store them. But, you know, I just think it's cool that Laserdisc was not immune to getting those really nice releases for horror movies too, like Jason Goes to Hell. And this one looks really good too, man. I tell you, my unrated Jason Goes to Hell Laserdisc is the real deal. It's still a great way to watch it. Again, by the mid-'90s, the technology, it was getting better. Laserdiscs that weren't special editions were even looking better too. So this is still a cool way to watch this movie. I touched on this earlier, but again, a big misconception I've seen is that Laserdisc was a flop. It was a farce. It didn't really last long. It was a breath in the wind. It was here and gone. And that's just not true. Again, because it was so elusive in people's lives, and some people say, I never saw a Laserdisc growing up, think that it existed for a few years. But like I said, it went till the late 90s in America, 1999-ish, and even 2001 in Japan. Here's another example of a late-life Laserdisc. Here's Wishmaster. We all know Wishmaster. This was a very late 90s horror film, kind of the Expendables of horror. This movie had Tony Todd, Kane Hodder, Robert Englund in it, a lot of great horror characters that we would know from great franchises, and this came out in 97. And I gotta say, this is another great one. By this point, widescreen on Laserdisc was just the norm. It didn't need to be a special edition to be a widescreen. That's just the way that they made these. So, again, at the time, if you wanted to see Wishmaster, you weren't going to get any better than this lovely release. And special features, again, were another thing. This includes a documentary, audio commentaries, and Dolby Digital Surround with the original aspect ratio as intended by the director. So, again, at the time, man, Laserdisc was if you were a home media guy, you know, I just wish there were more of us around back then that probably are now with the way we love Blu-rays and stuff, because we really could have been taking care of Laserdisc back then, man. And I'm sure there were tons of sales, but I just feel like, you know, I wish it would have lasted a few years longer, because I really wish we would have got a Jason X Laserdisc. Now, we talk about how cool a lot of foreign releases look from other companies, especially back in the day on VHS, and again, Laserdisc was no exception. Here is a Japanese Laserdisc of Jason Takes Manhattan, and again, the artwork is always above and beyond. They go the extra mile. They shortened the image here, but they had this cool border around this, and there's also this really great artwork on the back where you see Jason in the city, and it's a lot busier. Japan really did a great job on a lot of their artwork. Sometimes they would miss the mark, but more times than not, they did a really good job. So this Laserdisc of Jason Takes Manhattan from Japan is one of my favorites, and it includes that Obi strip, which I believe is somewhat of a hype sticker, if you will, with information and things like that. Now, there are people that say that when they would sell these, they would take them off. But then why do I have mine? It's one of those things that I don't know. I don't know the actual use of the Obi strip legitimately, but I think of it probably as somewhat of like a nice hype sticker with information about the release. Talking more about the special edition stuff we would see from Laserdisc 2, there are also super special editions, if you will. Here's one example, and then my very last one is a Mecha Special Edition. So this came out in 1999. Here's the Signature Collection Universal Home Studios release of Psycho the Remake. We all know that this movie came out in 1998, so Laserdisc was still going to the fullest extent with their releases in the late 90s. And this Psycho remake is an example of just a release that, you know, all the bells and whistles. Again, you have the ability for audio commentaries, documentaries, multiple audio commentaries, making ofs. It's amazing. And they would put a lot of stuff, like if it's a lot of nice special features, it'd be on its own disc that you could throw in. So if you look at the back, it'll tell you disc 2, side 3 is a documentary, side 4 is behind the scenes and stuff. So if you wanted to get more than just the movie back then, a release like this would really satisfy the needs. This is what you would call a collector's edition or the signature collection. This is a Scream Factory style release, as it were. So as physical media collectors, one of our favorite things to look at is super duper collector's editions. When I mention that, I'm talking about things like Scream Factory Halloween collection or the Friday the 13th collection or the Welgo Phantasm sets or the Hellraiser Scarlet box, which is going for a lot of money now because people want it. I have what could be considered the original Hellraiser Scarlet box set. This thing is really cool. So this is an example of one of the finest collector's editions that Laserdisc had, and it's really cool. Here is my super collector's edition of Hellraiser. Now this sucker's over an inch thick, so this is the Deluxe collector's edition. Now the case is this really nice box that's like you can feel the nails on the cover. It's shiny, it's nice, it's limited to 2,500. So, you know, this thing slides out. And of course, in here is the Deluxe Collector's Edition Laserdisc. And this thing is a beauty. Now, still till this day, this release of Hellraiser is the real deal. It looks and sounds impeccable. I love it so much. It actually retains that feel and style that the Arrows have with their really nice, clean 4K remasters. This one has that same style. They didn't affect anything of the picture quality. They weren't doing what we call DNR, that digital noise reduction, like James Cameron does. I don't know what his problem is. He's ruined Terminator 2 because of that. And that's why I've never bought Terminator 2 on 4K, because I refuse to watch that movie DNR'd. But this is the real deal, man. And again, audio commentaries. There are special features that you have a separate disc to watch on because it's the real deal. The way Scream Factory has disc 2s for special features, this is it. But I said that this was a special super duper deluxe version. Underneath that, you could see they embroidered imagery from the Hellraiser pictures and posters on here. And then here's a script. And you might be thinking, that's pretty cool. It's the script to Hellraiser. Well, this script is autographed. Well, maybe I could find the page. By Clive Barker himself. So, yeah. Pretty freaking cool. So that's an example of Laserdisc at one of its finest, type of releases. The movie fans format, as it were. So, I've had this love for Laserdisc ever since hearing about it since I was a little kid, and it became something I was infatuated with. From about 2010 to about 2015, I would buy Laserdiscs over any other format. I would hear about a Scream Factory title coming out like Prison, and I would go out and buy the Laserdisc of it instead than getting the Blu-ray. I've since really laid back on Laserdisc, and I call myself semi-retired. I will still buy Laserdiscs, but it may be 2 or 3 a year at best now. And I think last year I only bought one, which was Forbidden Planet on a widescreen release. It's something that I have dove into so hard. I've gotten a lot of what I've wanted, but I don't have everything I've wanted. It's not something I'll ever completely give up because I respect and love the format so much, but I do wish that more people would be aware of the legacy of Laserdisc and not think of it as just some weird thing that came and went. It's a really amazing release that you could find more videos that'll go way more in depth and talk about the format and what it had to offer. But I just wanted to take today and talk about what I think is still the coolest physical media format to ever exist. The original collector's edition format, Laserdisc. So I thank you guys for watching this video. If you have any Laserdisc memories yourself, I'd love to hear them. And just check them out, man. If you ever see one at a used store somewhere, get it for me, just to collect them. Buy a Laserdisc and hang it on the wall or something. Thank you for watching this video. We'll see you guys next time.